Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Can't wait to get into a brand new Cabral Concept here. I always love doing these Training Thursday shows or High Performance Health Thursdays, whatever you want to refer to them as. But this one for sure is going to be a controversial one, and that is because we're going to be talking about diet. And everyone always has their mind made up about what the healthiest nutrition plan is. What I like to do is just stay open-minded. So in my practice, I have people that are vegan. I have people that are pescatarians. I have people that are carnivore. I have people that are keto. My goal is simply to help support them in any way they need or want, and also show them, based on their lab results and the research, where they may want to be moving towards. But my goal is not to be dogmatic about anything, especially nutrition, when we know that different body types respond to carbohydrates, especially starchy carbohydrates, root vegetables, etc., in a different way. Some people don't do as well with grains. Some people don't do as well with nuts or things like that. And also some people don't do as well with higher levels of saturated fat based on their specific alleles and other things as well. But we're getting, some people right away will say, that's not true. That's not true. Saturated fats aren't bad for you. Again, we're not making dogmatic black and white statements, but the research I want to share with you here today, and I'm going to pop up an image of it, and I'm going to put all of the links to the studies at stevencabral.com/331. And you will see on this chart, so I'm just going to share with you, and again, I'm just the messenger, but a 2023 systematic review and meta-analysis by Nguyen Schweidner. I wish I could pronounce that properly, but I'm going to link up all the studies here today. It looked at about 250,000 people, so 250,000 people, analyzing 37 different publications from 24 different cohorts. And what the study found was pretty remarkable. They actually shared definitively how to reduce heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and all-cause mortality between 25 to 35%. Actually, the highest number is 36%. And whenever I see this type of research, I know that I want to bring it to you because it is legitimate. I mean, this is high-quality research that you can agree or disagree with, but there's also an amazing image that goes straight down the replacement foods. And when certain foods are replaced with other foods, you can see the reduction in cardiovascular disease or all-cause mortality. And it is stark. There is only one food where they didn't get an improvement as they began to switch it out. So what is that food that we're talking about? Well, the main one, and I'm going to go over it right now, is processed meat. So processed meat would be basically, the easiest way to think about this is anything that's packaged that can last for a long period of time, that there's some type of preservatives, or it's highly processed from the real thing. So what would the real thing be? Well, the real thing would be, let's say, a filet or a ribeye or something like that with red meat. Or you might say it's just regular pork, or it is, I don't even know, chicken to a chicken sausage. Anytime it's been processed to salami, bacon, pepperoni, etc., it becomes a processed meat. This then allows it to be shelf stable for weeks to potentially months. That's the best way to think of processed meats, because yes, some processed meats use naturally occurring nitrates and nitrates. They might use celery instead. They might use regular sea salt. They might use, so like, yes, there are better ways to do it, no doubt about it. But again, this is important just for us to look at, because I'm not saying to you that you can never eat meat. I eat meat in my diet, all right? Or you can even eat red meat, because we're going to talk about that next, or eggs, or any of these foods. The issue seems to be when it's overdone for your body. So let me give you now some of these amazing statistics. And again, you don't have to necessarily agree with them, but if you don't agree with them, you have to have a reason why. And it can't just be like, well, I really like eating these things, because that's not necessarily the best answer. You can really like to eat them. And also you can dismiss the studies. That's okay too. But the studies are legitimate, and I think it's time for us to actually just kind of look at this with a more open mind and just say, all right, the truth to this, how can we work with this if we want to live the longest, healthiest life possible? And let's start to look at that. Okay, so here's what the main factor was, but also an amazing screenshot that I'm going to put up for you. In this graphic, here's what they did. They replaced red meat with either nuts, legumes, or whole grains. They also replaced processed meat with nuts, legumes, or whole grains. They did the same with chicken, just nuts and legumes. They replaced fish. They replaced dairy. They replaced eggs. And then they also replaced butter. So here's the interesting thing. And I want to see if you can guess it. There's one main food that when they replaced it, they actually got a negative result. And I want to see if you can think of specifically what that food would be when we are talking about the red meat, processed red meat, the poultry, fish, dairy, eggs, or butter. And the butters one is a little bit dubious. We'll talk about that in just a moment because the mode of confidence is very low on that one. So I won't actually be talking about that too much here today. And although quite a few people are obviously studied with this, confidence is very low because of what they replaced it with, right? Because the product they replaced it with, margarine, is actually quite an unhealthy product in itself and quite inflammatory for the majority of people. Okay, so let me share with you what the results were. The greatest statistical movement to decrease your risk for heart disease and all-cause mortality is to replace processed meats, all processed meats, with either nuts, legumes, or whole grains. And believe it or not, the nuts, all you need to replace is 20 grams, which is a small handful of nuts, in place of those red meat, which is what they had them do, to get a huge decrease. And I'll give you the specific statistics and then I'll run down them at the very end. So you got about a 25% improvement with legumes and nuts by replacing them with processed meat, and a 35% reduction by replacing it with whole grains, which might be things like oats or quinoa or whatever you would like. Now, keep in mind, and it's actually technically 36%. When you look at this, why would that be? Well, you're replacing it actually with something with a good amount of fiber. And so fiber probably had a huge role when you're looking at all-cause mortality, type 2 diabetes, and also cardiovascular disease. All right. So now when they replace red meat, the result wasn't as statistically significant. So I just want to share that with you because I like to be honest in all these studies. By replacing red meat with nuts, there was a 7% reduction in cardiovascular disease, and with whole grains, only 4%. Just a little less even for legumes. So not huge, but about the same. So was there a reduction in cardiovascular disease by replacing red meat? Yes. Now, could you say, well, this is conventional red meat, this is hamburger, this is whatever? You could make that argument. There's no doubt about that. And I'm not saying that you should make that argument, but I am saying the studies do show and what I'm going to share at the end is by adding literally a handful of nuts per day and just a little bit less meat, you will improve your overall cardiovascular system, chances for type 2 diabetes and all-cause mortality by somewhere between most likely 10 and 30%. That's pretty significant. A handful of nuts a day, just a little less meat, right? If we cut to the chase. All right, let me just give you the one though on eggs. So replacing just one egg a day with 25 grams of nuts. So again, a decent sized handful in your palm of nuts, that's about 30 grams. A small handful, about 20 grams. In between that, 25 grams. That's all you need to think about. Reduced all-cause mortality by 15%. Pretty impressive, right? And I'm not saying eggs are a bad food for you, but just think about it. Like, well, what's the total quantity for you? Do you have any nuts in your diet? Do you have a lot of fiber in your diet? Because if not, this could really help. And then they found about a 10% improvement with legumes. Okay, one of the ones that I found to be the most interesting before I rattle off the stats in just a second is that dairy was negligible. So when you remove dairy from the diet, you got a little bit of an improvement, no doubt about it, with nuts and legumes combined, not as much. Okay, here's the fact, and same with poultry. Poultry was decent improvements, like 10% or less of nuts and legumes. Fish though, when they replaced fish in the diet, it was about a net for nuts, so about the same. And when you replaced fish with legumes, you actually might have lost benefit. So fish in the diet, as I've spoken about before for the longevity diet, about 3 times a week, probably a net positive overall. Yeah, without a doubt. Okay, replacing butter with margarine, again, like not something that I even want to get into because margarine is so bad for you. Call that about a net on that one as well. On this study showed some positive benefit. I do have to say that, but again, I can't recommend that. And a very low confidence of the certainty of evidence is what they called it. And then olive oil was a moderate to minor improvement. So little improvement there with olive oil. Okay, so what I'm sharing with you right now is the heavy hitters. Processed meat, one of the biggest ones that we need to remove from the diet. Replacing it with a handful of nuts a day, unbelievable. Legumes, how much? About a half a cup or so. And then whole grains, not everybody does great with them, but a half a cup or so of whole grains per day, maybe 1 cup as well if you're looking at oatmeal, quinoa, etc. Now let me share the specific stats with you, and all the links I'm going to give you will be at stephencabral.com/3331. Okay, here is the summary. Cardiovascular disease risk: replacing processed meats with nuts, legumes, or whole grains and eggs with nuts was linked to a lower risk of cardiovascular disease. Type 2 diabetes: substituting red or processed meat with whole grains or nuts and eggs with nuts or whole grains was associated with a reduced risk of type 2 diabetes and all-cause mortality. Replacing red or processed meat, dairy, or eggs with nuts, legumes, or whole grains and butter with olive oil corresponded to a decreased risk of death from all causes. Here we go. Cardiovascular disease: replacing meat with nuts was associated with a 27% reduced risk. So this is all cardiovascular disease. Substituting processed meat with legumes resulted in 23% reduced risk. Replacing processed meat with whole grains led to a 36% reduced risk. Substituting eggs with nuts was linked to a 7% reduced risk. Replacing butter with olive oil showed a 4% reduced risk. Type 2 diabetes: replacing red meat with whole grains was associated with 10% reduced risk. Substituting red or processed meat with nuts resulted in 8% reduced risk. Replacing poultry with whole grains led to a 13% reduced risk of type 2 diabetes. Substituting eggs with nuts or whole grains was linked to an 18% decreased risk for getting type 2 diabetes. Now, all-cause mortality: replacing red meat with nuts was associated with a 7% reduced risk. Substituting processed meat with nuts showed a 21% reduced risk. Replacing processed meat with legumes resulted in 9% reduced risk. Substituting dairy with nuts was linked to a 6% reduced risk. And replacing eggs with nuts or legumes led to a 15% reduced risk. So, pretty impressive statistics. What does this mean for you? Does it mean that you can never eat meat again, never have poultry like chicken or turkey again, or ever have eggs? It doesn't mean that at all. What it means is that we need to be conscious of, I would say, the totality, the amount we are eating in our diet. If we look at the healthiest diet in the world, which is really the foundation of all diets should be, the Mediterranean-based diet, they have meat in their diet. They have fish in the diet a few times a week to substitute out instead of meat. They do have nuts. They have a lot of fiber. They have brightly colored fruits and veggies in there as well. And that allows them then to be able to buffer, I think, a lot of these other meats and processed foods as well. So when we look at that, we need to say there's something beyond just eliminating the meat or the eggs or other products like poultry as well. It's what you're not getting into your diet, right? So we need to focus on maybe what we're missing, such as nuts or legumes or even whole grains. It still needs to fit your total macros. It still needs to fit what's best for your overall health. And it doesn't mean that you need to totally eliminate these foods. What it does mean is that if you're eating meat 3 times a day, you're going to be just as healthy, if not healthier, if you reduce that to once or twice a day. You can substitute fish for a lot of meat-based products. And again, I know it's somewhat goal-based. If you are an athlete, if you are really looking for bodybuilding or big, fitness-based transformation, I do get it that increasing your protein and meat and things like that will help with those goals. But let's just not confuse the bodybuilding-based goals with health goals, because they're not synonymous. They are not one and the same. And I would actually say in many regards, they don't fit each other's model. So I just wanted to share that with you here today. The 20 grams I shared with you, it's pretty simple, about 20 almonds, 15 or so cashews, 20 hazelnuts, 15 macadamia. So it's really easy. You're just talking about like a tablespoon and a half or so, 2 tablespoons, really simple. And as I talked about with the legumes, a half a cup, depending on the individual, maybe 1 cup of legumes a day. And the whole grains, that's really based on the individual, but you do truly want to shoot for 30 to 35 plus grams per day of fiber. That will help sweep through a lot of the different issues that might be going on in your intestines. And of course, if you're dealing with bloating or gas or distension, loose stool, constipation, you want to run something like the Big Three or the Gut Bundle over at stephencabral.com/shop. That's going to be your Candida metabolic vitamins test, your IgG food sensitivity, and your bacteria and parasite stool test to look at what's going on in the gut. If you can only do one, do the Candida metabolic and vitamins test. And of course, if you don't want to run it with myself and my team, totally fine, totally get it. You can run it with an integrative health practitioner level 2 or a qualified practitioner in your neck of the woods. All right, like I said, all of this is based on science, real science, huge meta-analysis, over 250,000 people, hundreds of thousands of people benefited from this. I think you can too. All the results will be at stephencabral.com/3331. Check it out for yourself. Take care, buddy. Have an amazing day. I'll be back tomorrow with our Friday review. Thanks so much for tuning into today's show. Before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I want to make sure that you're getting our daily content, not missing out on anything. Functional medicine, wellness, weight gain, weight loss, anti-aging, living longer, stronger, and all of the most cutting-edge research. And if there's any topics you want to hear, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Take care.